You don't go home for Christmas the year it starts. You don't go home the year after that either. By year 3, your mother stops setting a plate for you at the table. Not because she stopped loving you, because she stopped knowing who you are. That's the job. Your name is Michael Torres, except it isn't. It hasn't been for 7 years. Your name is Marco Reyes, loan shark, mid-level grinner in a crew that moves stolen freight out of the port of Newark. You have a New Jersey driver's license, a lease on an apartment in Bayonne, a fake credit history, and a scar on your left forearm from a fight that never happened. The Bureau gave you all of it. What the Bureau couldn't give you was the muscle memory for lying to people who would kill you if they suspected you were lying. You had to build that yourself. It starts the way most things start, quietly, in a conference room with fluorescent lights and bad coffee. You've been with the Bureau 4 years when the offer comes. White-collar fraud, which means spreadsheets, depositions, and the slow grind of financial crimes that don't make the news until someone loses their pension. You're good at it, patient, detail-oriented. Your supervisor says you think like an accountant. She means it as a compliment. You take it as one. Then, a man named Halpert walks in, senior intelligence, the kind of agent who doesn't carry business cards because the fewer people who know his name, the better. He puts a folder on the table, 8 photographs, 8 men connected to an organized crime network operating out of the Northeast, stolen cargo, extortion, and a pipeline into something larger. Not drugs, not weapons, fentanyl precursor chemicals, industrial shipments moving through legitimate freight companies, rerouted at the port, handed off to operators 3 states away. The network generates somewhere north of 40 million a year. The men in those photographs have never been convicted of anything. Halpert doesn't ask if you want the job. He asks if you understand what the job actually is. You understand. 2 years minimum undercover, possibly longer. You would stop being yourself. You would build a new person from scratch and live inside that person completely. New name, new history, new relationships. You would make friends you'd eventually testify against. You would attend their children's birthday parties. You might attend their funerals. You tell him yes before he finishes explaining. You would wonder later why you said it so fast. The honest answer is that you were 31 years old and your life fit inside a 1-bedroom apartment with no photographs on the walls. It wasn't hard to leave. The preparation takes 4 months. They don't call it training because that word implies a finish line. The first thing they do is kill Michael Torres. Systematically, they cancel his credit cards, dissolve his lease, deactivate every account tied to his real name. His digital footprint shrinks to nothing. If someone searches for him, they find a ghost. They move his mother to a different phone number and brief her with enough information to keep her safe and not a word more. Then they build Marco Reyes. Marco grew up in Perth Amboy. Father worked the docks before his back gave out. Mother cleaned offices downtown. Dropped out of community college, did 18 months at Rahway for receiving stolen property. Stayed clean after that, or appeared to. Knows how freight moves because he grew up around men who moved it. Not smart enough to run anything. Not stupid enough to be a liability. Useful, dependable. The kind of man a crew takes on without celebrating. You memorize his life like a role, except roles end when the curtain drops. This one doesn't drop. They run you through scenarios, not for weeks, for months. An instructor sits across from you and tells you to describe your childhood. You describe Marco's childhood. He does it again the next day. Same question. Different phrasing, and again a week later at 2 in the morning when you've been awake for 19 hours. The goal isn't for you to remember the story. The goal is for the story to feel true. Memory behaves differently than recitation. If you're reciting, your eyes move slightly before you answer. Your breathing changes. Experienced people notice. They teach you to not notice yourself noticing things. That one takes the longest. An instructor follows you through a parking garage for 40 minutes. When you exit, she asks what you observed. You missed 3 things. She lists them. You go back in. This time you catch all 3 and you missed 2 others. This continues for 6 weeks until walking into any enclosed space feels like reading a page of text. Everything registers. Nothing reads as effort. They teach you how to drink without drinking. how to order rounds and nurse a single glass across an entire evening. Men in this business drink. Men in this business also remember who doesn't keep up. The trick is to look like you're keeping up. Pour a little out when hands are shaking. Leave a glass at the bar when you walk to the bathroom. Trade a full drink for a nearly empty one during the chaos of a crowded room. The day before you go in, Halpert meets with you one last time. He slides a piece of paper across the table with a phone number on it. One contact. Emergency use only. Anything short of imminent physical danger, you handle yourself. He tells you something you'll think about for years afterward. He says the most dangerous moment in any undercover operation isn't the first week. It's around month 8 or 9. When you've gotten comfortable, when the character starts feeling natural, when you wake up in the morning and spend a full 5 seconds not remembering who you actually are. He says that's the moment you need to be most careful, not because you'll break cover, because you won't want to. The first contact is a man named Denny Pasquarelli, 3rd tier in the crew. Runs a cash advance place in Kearney that doesn't actually do much lending. Your handler sets up the introduction through a CI who owes the bureau more favors than he can count. Denny is short, loud, and deeply suspicious of everyone he's met for less than a year. He tests you the way people in his world test everyone, not with questions, with silence. He puts you in rooms and watches what you do with nothing happening. You do nothing, quietly, patiently. You don't fill silence the way nervous people do. You sit with it like a man who's spent time waiting for things that took longer than expected. Week 2. Denny asks you to drive a truck from the port to a warehouse in Elizabeth. You don't ask what's in the truck. He's watching to see if you will. You don't. The truck has 4,000 cartons of cigarettes that were supposed to be shipped to Canada. You unload them in the back of a warehouse that smells like hydraulic fluid. A man you haven't been introduced to counts them twice and writes a number in a ledger. Nobody thanks you. Nobody explains anything. You get paid in cash in an envelope left in the cup holder of the truck. This is the job now. Moving things. Watching. Saying very little. For the first 3 months, you contribute almost nothing to the operation. You're tested constantly in ways you can never acknowledge noticing. A duffel bag left unattended near where you're working. A conversation that stops when you enter a room. Someone casually mentioning a name that doesn't exist to see if you react to it. You pass every test by not knowing you're being tested. That's the only way to pass them. Month 4. Denny's boss asks to meet you. Anthony Serio doesn't look like the photographs in the file. The file shows a heavy-set man in his late 50s with the kind of face that belongs on the wall of an old Italian restaurant. The man sitting in the back of a restaurant in Hoboken at 10 in the morning looks smaller, careful. A man who moves through the world conserving something. He orders espresso. He asks you where you grew up. You tell him Perth Amboy. He asks about the waterfront. You describe it correctly. He nods. He doesn't ask about your record or your experience or your skills. He asks about your father's back, whether it got better, whether the surgeries helped. You tell him it never really got better. Your father just got used to the pain. You watch something change in his expression. Not softness, recognition, the kind men have when someone describes a life they understand. He finishes his espresso. He stands. He shakes your hand once. On his way out, he says something to Denny that you can't hear. Denny tells you afterward. He said, "You're okay." In this world, that's an offer letter. Year 1 moves the way all genuinely dangerous things move. Slowly, then all at once. You spend 6 months in the margins, running deliveries, handling minor collections, sitting in the back of rooms where things are discussed and not discussed, where the vocabulary is a system of implication and omission. Nobody says the word stolen. Nobody says the word money. Nobody says anything that would sound like a crime if someone were listening. You are always listening. Everything you observe gets relayed through a system designed to be invisible. A code in the margins of a legal pad. A pattern of calls to a real estate office that passes information to a handler you've never physically met. twice a month, you go to a parking garage in Jersey City and leave a folded newspaper under a specific seat in a specific stairwell. There is never anyone there when you arrive. There is never anyone there when you leave. The newspaper is always gone the next morning.
You think of it as writing letters to a version of yourself that still works in a conference room with bad coffee. Around month 8, you understand what Halpert was warning you about. The men in this crew are not what the file made them. The file made them diagrams, nodes in a network, photographs attached to charges. In person, they are something more complicated. Denny has a daughter with a seizure disorder. He carries her medical schedule in his wallet behind his driver's license. He updates it every month. When she has a bad week, he gets quiet in a specific way. You learn to recognize it and not mention it. He takes that as respect. A man named Carmine, who handles the warehouse logistics, spent 2 years caring for his father during a long illness. He describes the last weeks with a precision that tells you he still thinks about them. He asks about your father's back, unprompted, once, 6 months in. The question is an offering. You understand that. Anthony Serio reads 3 books a month. He leaves them in the restaurant where you sometimes meet. History, mostly. Sometimes biography. He never discusses them. He just leaves them. You start reading the same ones. He notices. Nothing is said. You don't like these men. You can't afford to, but you understand them in a way you didn't expect. And understanding is more dangerous than liking, because liking is a feeling you can dismiss. Understanding is something you carry. Year 3 is when the case becomes what it was always supposed to be.
Anthony's crew connects to a distribution network in Philadelphia. The freight pipeline you've been mapping is just the financing mechanism. The real operation is the precursor chemicals, industrial shipments of thionyl chloride and acetic anhydride moving through the port on freight bills that list them as machine cleaning fluid and agricultural solvent. They're not. Combined and processed correctly, they are components in a synthesis chain that produces fentanyl analogs, the kind that don't show up on standard screening panels, the kind that started appearing in overdose cases across 4 states in quantities that confused the toxicology reports. You spend 3 weeks putting together the chain of custody in your head, memorizing it, every shipment, every contact, every reroute. You relay it through the parking garage in pieces over 6 weeks. Halpert contacts you through the emergency channel, first time in 3 years. He tells you the intelligence has moved up. It's not just organized crime anymore. The distribution end connects to a supply network with international ties. The Philadelphia operator has contacts in 2 countries that your crew doesn't know about, and Halpert isn't cleared to tell you over this channel. He tells you to stay in place. The operation is expanding. You tell him you understand. You hang up and sit in your car in the parking garage for 15 minutes, not moving. Stay in place means at least another year, possibly 2. It means more dinners where Denny talks about his daughter's medication, and you listen like someone who has nothing to hide. It means more mornings in Anthony's restaurant with a book you both read and neither of you discuss. It means the people who trust you will go to prison because you were in the room. You drive back to Bayonne. You make dinner. You eat alone. You think about Halpert's warning about month 8. You think about the fact that you're in year 3 and you still know exactly who you are. You're not sure if that makes it better or worse. Year 5, something goes wrong. A man named Ortega comes into the crew through Philadelphia, mid-level, moves between operations as a facilitator. He's careful in a way that makes you careful. He watches rooms the same way you do. He doesn't fill silence. 2 weeks after he arrives, he sits next to you at a dinner in a private room above a restaurant in Bloomfield. He makes small talk. He asks about Perth Amboy. You give the right answers. He asks about Rahway. You give the right answers. Then he asks the name of your unit, the cell block, a specific detail from a specific period of your supposed 18 months at the correctional facility. You tell him. He nods. He keeps eating. That night, you can't sleep. The question was either random or it wasn't. If it was random, you're fine. If it wasn't, he's already made you, and the fact that he hasn't acted yet means he's waiting for something. Authorization, the right moment, a confirmation from someone you haven't identified. You activate the emergency contact. Halpert pulls your prison record in 4 hours. The detail Ortega asked about is correct. Your cover holds. But Halpert tells you something that changes the temperature of everything. Ortega is not on their radar. He appears from nowhere. His background is thin, built quickly. The kind of background someone builds when they're trying to create
create a cover identity in a hurry. Someone else sent him into the crew. Someone checking on you. Not because they suspect you specifically, because they're verifying everyone. A sweep. You go back to work the next morning. Ortega nods at you when you arrive. You nod back.
You spend the next 6 weeks being flawlessly boring. No observations relayed, no patterns broken. You eat the same food, drive the same routes, say the same things to the same people. You are so completely Marco Reyes that you stop monitoring yourself. Ortega disappears after 8 weeks. No explanation, just gone. Denny shrugs. Guys come and go. Halpert tells you 6 months later that Ortega was working for a competing crew, doing their own internal security check on Anthony's operation. He wasn't looking for a federal agent. He was looking for a rival crew's plant. You weren't even the thing he was looking for. You process that information sitting in your car in the same parking garage. Then you fold a newspaper and leave it under the seat. Year 6, Anthony's health starts failing. You see it before anyone says anything. The weight comes off his face in a way that isn't voluntary. He takes longer to stand up from a table. He keeps espresso in front of him, but drinks it less. One afternoon in the restaurant, just the two of you, he asks you something unexpected. He asks if he has anyone. You tell him no. You keep it vague. Marco Reyes doesn't have anyone. That's part of the story. He's quiet for a moment. Then he says that's a hard way to live, moving things for other people and coming home to nothing. You agree that it is. He asks if you ever thought about a different life. If you ever looked at the version of yourself who made different choices early on and wondered what he looks like now. You tell him you stopped doing that. It doesn't help. He nods like you confirmed something he already believed. This is the conversation you will think about in the courtroom 2 years later, when you are testifying against him, and you have to keep your voice flat, and your eyes on the prosecutor, and not look at the defense table.
The arrests happen on a Tuesday morning in March. 41 warrants, 11 states, simultaneous execution. The coordination takes 14 months to build. You spend the last 4 months of the operation doing nothing but breathing and surviving, and being Marco Reyes so completely that you stop rehearsing it. The morning it happens, you're in the restaurant. Anthony is already there. Coffee, book on the table. He's reading something about the Byzantine Empire. You get a text from a number that's been dormant for 3 years. A single word. Clear. That means leave now. You stand. You tell Anthony you forgot something in the car. You'll be right back. He doesn't look up from the book. You walk out. You get in your car. You drive 4 blocks, turn onto a side street, and pull behind a white panel van. The door slides open. You step inside. They hand you a bottle of water. A federal agent you've never met puts a small device over the one in your ear that's been transmitting for 7 years and shuts it down. The silence in your head feels like something physical. Anthony is arrested 20 minutes later. At the table, still reading. 43 people are arrested that day across 4 states. The freight network is dismantled. The Philadelphia precursor pipeline is severed. 3 international contacts are flagged for action by other agencies in other countries. 18 months later, you sit in a federal courtroom and you testify for 4 days. Defense attorneys tried to describe Marco Reyes as a provocateur, a man who manufactured crimes, who created the evidence he later reported. You answer every question with the same flat accuracy you've spent 7 years building. You do not perform honesty. You perform Marco Reyes testifying, because after 7 years, that distinction has collapsed in a way you don't fully understand.
Anthony looks at you once during the 4 days. Not with anger, with something that looks more like exhaustion. You look back for exactly 1 second. Then you look at the prosecutor. The sentences range from 8 years to 22. Anthony gets 15. His health is cited. He'll probably serve 9. You read the sentencing report in a motel room in a state you don't want to name, and then you put it face down on the bed. They give you 6 months of administrative leave and a therapist who is cleared for classified debriefs. You meet twice a week for 3 months, and then once a week for 3 more. She's good. She doesn't tell you what you're feeling. She asks what you notice. You appreciate that. The bureau offers you a desk, white collar again, which is where you started. Spreadsheets, depositions, the slow grind of financial crimes. You take it. Your real name starts feeling like something you're borrowing back. You practice it the way you once practiced Marco's. Michael Torres. Michael Torres. The name sits in your mouth like a foreign word you learned young, and then forgot, and are now relearning. You get a 1-bedroom apartment in a city you choose specifically because it's nothing like Bayonne. No port, no freight yards, clean streets, a park 2 blocks away that you walk through on mornings when you can't sleep, which is most mornings. You call your mother on her birthday. She doesn't ask where you've been. She asks if you're eating. You tell her yes. She says she can tell by your voice. She says you sound like yourself again. You don't tell her that you're not sure which self she means. Denny's daughter turns 11 the year he begins his sentence. You know this because you looked it up. You don't know why you looked it up. You sit with the information for a while and don't do anything with it.
You write 2 paragraphs of a letter that you never send. You throw them out. Then you go to work. At your desk, there is a photograph of no one. Your apartment has no photographs either. You've been back 2 years, and it still looks like somewhere you're staying temporarily. You think sometimes about Halpert's warning, month 8, when the character starts feeling natural, when you wake up and spend 5 seconds not knowing who you are. He said that's the moment to be most careful. He was right, but he got the danger wrong. The danger isn't that you'll forget you're undercover. The danger is that you'll realize neither version of you feels more real than the other. That you assembled Michael Torres the same way you assembled Marco Reyes, piece by piece, chosen details, a workable story. You think about this at your desk with fluorescent lights and bad coffee. You test the water. The pH is fine. You log it and move on. Some nights you sit at the kitchen table and write. Not reports, not notes, just things you noticed. A description of the light in the restaurant on a Tuesday morning. The weight of a book left on a table between 2 people who never discussed it. The specific silence of a parking garage at 2 in the morning when you are entirely alone and completely someone else. You fill notebooks with it. Hundreds of pages of a life that belonged to no one.
That's the job nobody writes about. The long, quiet aftermath of 7 years inside someone else's skin. Coming home to a name you had to practice. Wondering which version of the story you're supposed to tell when someone asks who you are. The answer you give at work is Michael Torres. The answer you give yourself on the mornings you walk through the park when you can't sleep is still working on it. The cases you built are real. The sentences are real. The pipeline you dismantled is real. Somewhere tonight, shipments that would have moved through Newark aren't moving. People who would have processed those chemicals aren't processing them. An absence that nobody can measure. A harm that never happened. You don't know if that's enough. You know it's what you had. Nobody sent you because diplomacy failed. They sent you because some problems can't be solved from the outside. Some networks only open from within, and some doors only unlock if someone is willing to become, completely and convincingly, the kind of person who belongs on the other side. You were that person for 7 years. Some days, you're still not sure you're not.